Thank you very much for hosting us on the Gemini call, Simon, and nice to meet you all. I'm Beatrice, business analyst here at Arup, and today I would like to introduce you to the digital spine feasibility study, share some of the ongoing work, and raise a bit of a call for input at the end. So hopefully that's okay with everyone. So the digital spine feasibility study is a 6-month piece of work, stems from the recent Energy Digitalization Task Force, which found out the need for a minimum level of digital infrastructure across the energy sector, which they refer to as a digital spine. The goal of this spine is to facilitate the exchange of energy data in a secure and interoperable manner to support the level of data exchange needed to achieve net zero and lower the cost to consumer. As part of this work, we reframed the terms of the digital spine as a data sharing infrastructure for the energy sector, so a bit of a more functional definition. But mainly this looks at 2 core concepts. The first one is a cross-sector data sharing standardization mechanism. And this effectively will ensure that data can be shared in an interoperable manner. And the other one is a sector-wide data sharing mechanism, which effectively facilitates the actual sharing of that data. But let me go into a bit more details around how this thinking is currently shaping up. So the data standardization mechanism is a commonly structured data component software packages that can be deployed and used by any organization really across the energy sector as part of their own IT infrastructure. If you look here at the picture on the right, we see we have different data standardization nodes in yellow, green, red, and blue. There can be, in fact, a node for each organization that wants to share data across the energy sector. These nodes allow an organization to select and bring the data they want to share, align this to a minimum operable standard, and then make this available securely through API to those that meet the correct access criteria. So with the data then available to share, our study is looking to define in more detail the concept of a data sharing mechanism. And this is effectively the connectivity layer that supports the correct access and sharing of data. And it does so from both a technological and sort of governance perspective. It facilitates the search for the data, the request of the data from a node, and then helps the definition and brokerage of the right licensing agreement that are needed to access and use the data that you are requesting. However, when we think about the energy sector data sharing infrastructure, we are looking at how this is the basis of a wider connectivity ecosystem. And this is because the energy system data sharing infrastructure will have to connect with data across other sectors to support the data exchange needed to achieve net zero. How we're looking to do that is that we are thinking to basically leverage the distributed implementation of the data sharing infrastructure. So we have a lot of we have this concept of data standardization nodes that can link not just to the energy data sharing infrastructure, but also to the data sharing fabric of very other different sectors. So in the picture, you can see how some of these nodes are connected to a water future data sharing fabric, or potentially Credo, or any other. This effectively will help us provide let's say, system of system connectivity. And will also allow us to sort of bring forward and promote trustworthiness around sharing for cross-sector use cases. As we progress with our study now, we are defining a bit in more detail, okay, what actually this data sharing infrastructure is made of, what does it look like? And so we are looking at defining a bit more some of the core characteristics of it. And I will draw your attention to just a couple of those. But the first one is around distributed implementation. So as I mentioned already, the data sharing infrastructure has this sort of data standardization component, which is actually a node. And we're looking at having these nodes deployed across a lot of organizations. So basically, we're creating a system of nodes that are in different organizations, but they operate as a unified network. And this is a fundamental shift for more a monolithic type of architecture, and would allow us greater scalability and sort of fault tolerance across participants as the system expands. The other key characteristic is sort of open source foundational components. So in order to really promote interoperability and the widest deployment from people, we are looking to have some of the core foundational component built in open source technology. We are also making sure that part of the spine is really this data standardization enabler element. So the node will be able to be to allow us to enforce a minimum level of interoperability across the energy data, which will also help ensure that the data is described in a way that is, let's say, more searchable and easy to discover. And finally, of course, the data sharing infrastructure needs to be secure. The data that is going to be shared will have security, commercial, and privacy implication, and so it's going to be essential that the entire mechanism can provide trusted, secure, and resilience sharing of data. So where we are now looking to test this concept in detail further and refine them through the exploration of potential use cases. These use cases will also help really very much assess the extent to which the spine enable the response to unmet needs and challenges across the energy sector. So we will be able to gauge the scale of the impact of the spine and therefore make a good case for its future implementation. But so what we've done for now is we've explored a series of use cases and shortlisted some of them, and we have a bit of a portfolio with some more strategic and policy focused use cases and others that are more like day one use cases. And I'll give you an overview of which one those are. So the first one is around vulnerable consumer identification. So in this use case, we are looking at how can the spine help bring together an up-to-date view of vulnerable consumers to help energy sector understand the impact of policy actions and how we actually can support this consumer going forward. The next one is around the electricity market reform. So how can the spine help the future electricity market reflect more accurately the cost and price of energy? The third one looks at a sector coupling, so how we can bring together the massive amount of data that is needed to integrate the production, consumption, conversion, and storage of energy across various domains, including electricity, gas, heat, hydrogen, to help reduce unnecessary emission. We have a use case around electricity flexibility, so how can the spine bring together the right information around all the assets connected to the grid and all the available flexible options so that the best decision can be made and we can use energy flexibility and ensure that we can use renewable electricity sources as much as we can. And finally, we have a use case around local area energy planning. So how can the spine help bring the data that is needed for local area to define the change required to transition to net zero? So we are now looking to talk to key users to gain valuable insight around these challenges, needs, and pain points across these 5 use cases. Some are very energy focused, while others actually go across many domains, such as local energy planning use case and the vulnerable customer identification. So let me maybe finish this brief presentation with a request. If you or anyone in your network consider themselves as an actor or a stakeholder across any of the use cases, please get in touch. We are looking to set a 30-45 minutes interview in the next couple of weeks, and we really appreciate to hear from people on the network. So with this, I think I'll finish, and here is our email address. So please let us know if you want to hear more, and if not, just always email Simon. He will pass things through. Thank you.
So going to our first question, if I could be, to yourself, which you said you mentioned about working with Credo, so that's the climate resilience demonstrator from the DT Hub, and similar initiatives in the energy sector. Can you elaborate on exactly how this will happen? Oh, your microphone's playing up a bit there, B.
Yeah, it was on my head, so you could definitely not hear my thinking. But yeah, so we've been actually engaging with Credo quite closely in the first few months of this feasibility study, as well with other initiatives across the energy sector, such as the virtual energy system. And this is quite key for us. We if our objective is to create a wider connectivity ecosystem, we need to start to make sure that what is there and has been done is something that we can learn from, and we plan from the start of how we integrate into that. Both Credo, the virtual energy system, and other initiatives across the energy sector, like the AAR and others, will keep on being engaged throughout the feasibility study and will help actually define how this is going to happen, which we're not there yet. We have 3 months to go. But we're very hopeful that this will allow us to get to quite of a good solution and understand really how do we work and together and facilitate that. But at the simplest, if we will have this concept of node implemented, then people like Credo or whoever can simply just go and request the data through those APIs, provided that they meet the right access controls criteria. So yeah, hopefully that answered the question. We're not yet there in details, but yeah, the plan is to get there.
Thank you, Bea. Next question again for yourself, if you could please, is could you share a bit more about the open source foundation components? For example, when, whom, and what standards?
Yeah, so all of that is all the detail is in development we're looking at, but the fundamental idea is that effectively that the data standardization node needs to be something that can be deployed easily across any organization across the sector. This means that and also needs to be something that is part of a network. So we need to make sure that all of these components remain in sync. So we've evaluated a couple of approaches, and we've landed on having the node built on open source stack is possible as the most viable one for now. The one by whom and standard is all to be defined, and we will be looking though through the course of the next 3 months to understand whether is there anything out there that could already provide the type of functionalities that we want, and what would be the timescales, not just of his delivery, but also an implementation, but also what are the other consideration if you put a bit of open source software? How is that maintained? How is that governed? Who looks after the cost of it? So those are all things that we will have to consider. Hopefully we'll have an answer by the end of the feasibility study.
Next question, B, to yourself here is, are you working with ISO, CEN or BSI at all to develop data standardization?
Yeah, so at the moment, the what we're looking around data standardization is not as such creating new standards per se, but we're looking to use our data standardization component to push those standards that are currently either mandated or best practice across the sector. So there's one thing. And the other thing we're going to look at sort of pushing standards that maybe relate to best practice in how you describe data. So I don't know, doubling core for metadata and other things. However, we do recognize that there are going to be data that people would want to share that has no actual best practice standards identified or used across the industry. And so the spine will have to sort of be able to work with those bodies or organizations that are going to look to define and bring a bit of standardization and therefore adopt and help them actually adopt maybe and develop some of the standards. So there is in the future potential for working with specific organizations. I think this partially probably answered the second question. So around the standards being considered. And I think there was also another one around semantic harmonization, which is again interesting. And if people do have a strong feeling and expertise in this area, please do get in touch with us. We are very, very welcome to have conversation with people. That would be very, very useful.